I managed to catch up earlier today with Adam Creighton. He's a former economist with the Reserve Bank of Australia, and of course he's the departing Washington correspondent for the Australian newspaper. Adam Creighton, thanks for joining us. Do you think that Donald Trump's going to be able to unleash the animal spirits of the American economy?
Well, certainly that is the expectation, and we've already seen the stock market's gone up a little bit since he's come into office. But look, I mean, the stock market is very expensive at the moment, most expensive that it's ever been, and so there is a possibility that he has been handed this hot potato with the economy. The fiscal situation is also very bad. He doesn't like to talk about that because he's a big spender. He was a big spender in his first term. I mean, as you know, the US government has more debt than it did in World War II.
This is what I was going to ask you about. There's incredible levels of debt. Can he do anything about that? Will he do anything about that?
No, he won't. I don't think he will at all. I mean, of course, they have this DOGE, you know, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is a source of much amusement. But look, I just look back at the history of Western governments, and they find it very hard to cut spending, extremely hard politically. And I mean, Trump has said, for instance, that he's not going to slash Medicare, he's not going to slash Social Security. These are two of the three biggest line items in the US budget. Plus, of course, the military. That's the other big one, the third one, and he's not going to touch that either.
Sure.
So what's he going to cut? There's not much left.
It's about growth then, isn't it? Somehow instigating more economic growth, keeping taxes low and hoping debt reduces as a percentage.
Yeah, look, I would say that's wishful thinking. That's called the Laffer curve, or at least he came up with that idea. I think most US taxes are already pretty lower. I mean, certainly they're lower than ours in Australia. And in fact, that's a problem for Australia, I think, because we're going to become more and more uncompetitive compared to the US, and our economy is already struggling, as you know, quite significant. What have we had? 7 quarters of negative growth? I think I've read.
Per capita recession.
And so we've got a top marginal tax rate of 47 cents that cuts in, at least in US dollar terms, at $110,000, which is very low. You know, why would a smart American want to move to Australia under those circumstances? Or indeed anyone from any. So I think Trump will put pressure on whoever is in power in Australia to run a more competitive economy.
So much happened yesterday, so many decisions announced. One that really stood out for me was the energy emergency, halting some wind investments or at least approvals, promising to ramp up oil and gas production. This has huge ramifications for Australia because we face the same problem.
Yes, it certainly does. And look, it's great for the US, but of course the US and Australia are competitors with LNG exports. So it's not necessarily a great thing for Australia if the US is going to flood the market with more supply. Prices could go down. That could affect our currency, which actually has already been falling, as you know. So not necessarily great for Australia, but, you know, we should do the same. We could do the same.
That's the point, it's the lesson, isn't it? We need to understand we've created our own energy crisis.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Trump's decisions on fossil fuels are just more extremely important politically because I think they signal the end or the high watermark of this obsession with green energy, etc., net zero, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if the most powerful country in the world, still, you know, by far the most important economy, is not going to pursue that, then how silly does everyone else look?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And especially Australia.
An energy-rich country like Australia, yeah.
Especially Australia. So, I mean, I don't think that we can sustain our net zero policy in Australia politically if you've got the US.
Both sides are committed to it, though. Of course, both sides say even after this announcement, they'll stick to Paris.
The coalition's going to have to dump it, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my advice. I know this is not a political discussion, but that's my advice.
They should dump net zero. Peter Dutton should, but
it's increasingly unpopular.
Yeah.
Right? It's increasingly unpopular.
Just finally then, let me get your thoughts on this. It's outside really politics and economics. Well, it's politics, all right, but the media in this country. It's extraordinary to see the polarisation watching over the last couple of days on certain channels, most of them, I suppose. This is terrible. Trump's he's going to start a war with China over Panama. He's letting criminals out of jails. They just think it's terrible. Fox News and elsewhere, and certainly more akin to the way I see it, there's a new optimism, there are new opportunities. This is a chance for for America to strike out anew.
Yeah, look, well, I mean, certainly, you know, for 80% of the mainstream press here, extremely anti-Trump, but also their audiences are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I think people are getting angrier and angrier with this sort of polarisation in the media. It's going to be very interesting to see whether that changes now. Although, you know, all of the ridiculous nonsense about the Elon Musk salute, the so-called Nazi salute, does suggest to me that they haven't really learned any lessons, and they're still going to go along. But it actually helps. It actually helps Trump. So maybe he's secretly happy. He's actually secretly happy about their nonsense. So, look, I agree. It's, you know, two universes, but I think, the Fox version of events, I think, is far more realistic and reflects what most Americans are currently thinking.
Yeah, and the polls show that 56% approval for Donald Trump at
his
this
highest
very
ever.
moment.
His highest ever.
Incredible.
Somewhat ironically.
Thanks for joining us, Adam. I appreciate it.
No worries.